Welcome to the Rummage Report for April 16th, 2026. Today's topic is Trump fires AG Pam Bondi. Sam Balance kicks us off today.
Hey guys, I just read about President Trump firing Attorney General Pam Bondi, and it's got some serious implications for all of us. This abrupt move is raising eyebrows not just in political circles, but among regular folks too. Bondi was criticized for being too partisan, and while some might celebrate her exit, there's concern that her replacement, Todd Blanche, is another Trump loyalist. That could mean the DOJ continues to prioritize loyalty over impartiality, which is troubling for the rule of law. For everyday Americans, this could impact everything from healthcare to housing. If the DOJ under Blanche doesn't push for reforms like lowering drug prices or tackling corruption, we could see stagnation in those areas, which affects costs and access for families. Plus, when federal law enforcement loses its impartiality, it can have real consequences for community safety and civil rights. So, while some might see this as a shakeup, it's also a reminder that who leads the DOJ matters for all of us. Sam, you're right that who leads the DOJ matters, especially for everyday Americans. But I think you're missing a key point about what Trump's move signals. By firing Bondi, he's prioritizing a tough-on-crime approach that could actually lower costs for families. Stronger border enforcement can reduce strain on welfare systems, potentially saving taxpayers up to $150 billion a year, which could help lower inflation on essentials like food and housing. While I get the concern about loyalty over impartiality, I believe a focus on law and order can lead to safer communities and better economic prospects for working families.
Sam, you nailed it when you highlighted the implications of who leads the DOJ. This isn't just a political game, it's about real people. Casey, while I see your point about a tough-on-crime approach potentially easing costs, we have to acknowledge that aggressive enforcement often targets marginalized communities and can exacerbate existing inequalities. History shows us that prioritizing law and order without accountability can lead to increased violence and distrust in law enforcement, which ultimately harms community safety. The DOJ should be focused on justice and equity, not just political loyalty, or we risk further alienating those who need protection the most.
Casey, I get that a tough-on-crime approach sounds appealing, especially if it claims to save money. But let's not ignore the data showing that aggressive enforcement often targets low-income communities, which can lead to higher incarceration rates without actually addressing root causes of crime. For families in those areas, that means not just safety concerns, but also economic instability and loss of jobs due to criminal records. Jordan is right that these tactics can deepen distrust in law enforcement, ultimately making communities less safe. We need to balance law enforcement with justice and community trust to ensure real safety and economic health. Sam, I see your concern about the potential for bias under Todd Blanche. But let's not overlook the urgency of tackling crime and border security. The reality is that stronger enforcement can lead to significant savings for taxpayers, potentially up to $150 billion a year, which could help ease inflation pressures on essentials like food and housing. Plus, by focusing on law and order, we could see a drop in crime rates, which benefits everyone, especially families worried about safety. I get that there's a risk of overreach, but we also have to consider the real-world impact of a tough stance on crime.
Sam, you hit the nail on the head when you pointed out that the DOJ's leadership impacts real people's lives. Casey, while you argue that a tough-on-crime approach could save taxpayers money, history shows us that aggressive enforcement often backfires, especially in marginalized communities. For example, studies indicate that increased policing doesn't necessarily lead to lower crime rates. It often results in higher incarceration rates without addressing the root causes of crime, like poverty and lack of access to education or healthcare. This approach could further destabilize communities, making it harder for families to thrive. We need a justice system that promotes equity and safety, not one that prioritizes loyalty over justice.
The Conversation. Casey Liberty, Sam Balance, and Jordan Progress engaged in a nuanced discussion about President Trump's firing of Attorney General Pam Bondi and the implications of her replacement, Todd Blanche. Sam and Jordan voiced concerns about the potential prioritization of loyalty over impartiality in the DOJ. emphasizing how this could negatively impact community safety and civil rights. Casey, however, argued that a tough-on-crime approach could lead to significant taxpayer savings and a safer society, suggesting that law enforcement is crucial for economic stability. The disagreement centered on whether aggressive enforcement strategies genuinely improve safety and economic conditions, or whether they exacerbate inequalities and mistrust within communities. Worth thinking about. 1. If aggressive law enforcement disproportionately affects marginalized communities, should we prioritize crime reduction strategies that focus on prevention and rehabilitation instead of punitive measures? 2. How do we balance the need for effective law enforcement with the imperative to ensure equity and justice for all, especially in communities historically targeted by aggressive policing? 3. Can a focus on loyalty within the DOJ lead to systemic changes that improve community safety, or does it risk undermining the very principles of justice and accountability that the agency is meant to uphold? If you asked me, and remember, I'm a raccoon, I'd say it sounds like a classic case of you can't have your cake and eat it too.